Thank you for watching Friendship Community Church Sermons on Demand. We're pleased you have decided to view our pulpit messages. Our Sermons on Demand are a ministry of Friendship Community Church and are provided as a resource to anyone who desires to study the Word of God. So open your Bible and get ready to dig into the Word of God and see what God has for you today. So we're going through the minor prophets, and we're in Hosea, and we're Hosea chapter 4, verse 15. Am I right? Those of you that are keeping notes? Okay, good. And I have the map up again that we had last week. We didn't end up using it just in case, so you understand some of the things that we might get to today. I don't know how far we'll get. We might get to. I put that up because I wanted you to know the location of Mount Hermon up in the top of the. This is a map of the current land possession of Israel, not historicals. Just for a little bit for you to get a grasp on it. Israel had to take possession of that section of the Golan Heights, the eastern shore of the Sea of Galilee, and the problem was when that was occupied by the Syrians, the farmers who would farm this region, which it produces a lot of the produce for Israel, they had to up-armor their tractors because this is at a higher elevation. And the Syrians and the Lebanese would shoot down on them. So you're driving your tractor, tilling the field, dodging bullets. And so in the 6-Day War in 67, Israel took this piece of property back and didn't give it back because it is vital to their protection of their people. I want you to know right down here is a beautiful place called Hamat Gader, hot springs. The Romans had built a fantastic place there in the hot springs. We got to go in the hot springs there, Hamat Gader. It's a beautiful place. But yeah, it was that. This is my favorite region of Israel. Tiberias is my favorite city. Built right on the western shore of the Sea of Galilee, just absolutely beautiful. And you can walk around town and go to the falafel stands if you like that sort of thing. Falafels are awful as far as I'm concerned. They're awful. I don't like hummus, and I don't like chickpeas and that kind of stuff. So if you like that, you'll like falafels. If you don't like that, you won't like falafels. So. Okay, let's go back to, there's a map that shows, again, the entirety of Israel in its modern formation. This is the West Bank, what's commonly referred to as the West Bank, and you can see how important this is here to protect this farming region. And of course, now you can see Israel in New Testament times. This map represents what things look like about 400 years, 600 years after what we're talking about in Hosea. Land mass is the same, but what the names of the locations are is a little different. Which is the right map here? Is it the right one? No. I thought I had a map in there from the time of Hosea as well, but this will do. If we get to Mount Hermon, which is that, so the highest peak in the region, snow-capped most of the year, and it is the headwaters to the Jordan River, to the Sea of Galilee, and then from the Sea of Galilee emptying into the Jordan down into the Dead Sea. Of course, nothing comes out of the Dead Sea because it's 600 feet below sea level. And so it just continues. All the minerals build up in there. You can float in the Dead Sea really, really good. Even Ann could float in the Dead Sea. It is nasty. No, nothing goes to the bottom and nothing lives in there. So, okay, Hosea 4:15. Though you, Israel, play the harlot, let not Judah offend. Do not come up to Gilgal, nor go up to Bethaven, nor swear an oath, saying, as the Lord lives. It's interesting that Hosea, in declaring the prophecy against Israel, every once in a while throws in a statement, a prophecy against Judah. Remember, they've been divided now for a few hundred years. No good king in Israel, only a few good kings in Judah. And Hosea, probably born in Israel, definitely preaching to Israel most of the time, every once in a while throws in a prophecy against Judah. He's here warning Judah not to follow the same path of the false gods and the pagan practice that that Israel had. Israel didn't have a temple. They didn't have a prescribed place of worship. Their worship system still required them to take their sacrifices to Jerusalem. For a significant portion of the time that they were the divided monarchy, they were at war with each other. And so it wasn't like they could just load up their animals and go down to Jerusalem and go to the temple. So they developed other methods. And at the same time, they developed other gods, or they participated in the worship of other gods, most notably Baal and the various other Canaanite gods. Every one of the kings of Israel, of the northern tribe, had led the people further astray from worshiping Jehovah God. And here Hosea warns Judah, don't follow that path. The reference to the locations is not that Judah would go there, but would follow the practice. Remember, these guys are often at war. And particularly by the time of Hosea, Israel was kind of already a satellite of Assyria. They were paying tribute money to Assyria so that Assyria wouldn't come and completely destroy them. They thought that would go for a while, and it did. But eventually Assyria said, no, we're just going to come and take you. So just like the people from Israel couldn't go to the temple in Jerusalem, it's not practical for the Judeans to go north into the areas mentioned for pagan worship. They had plenty of places in Judah for their own pagan worship. It's really a symbolic reference for them not to follow the same practice of paganism that Israel had followed. I should point out that Gilgal is a special place, had been for hundreds of years, even before the Israelite occupation of, that is just absolutely the wrong way to say that, is the Israelite conquering of Canaan. Gilgal had been a place where worship of the Baal fertility gods had taken place. And once Israel took possession of the land, that continued to be a place. Remember, God said to them, destroy it all. Destroy all the Canaanites. And they didn't. And Gilgal is one of those strong places where they continued to have a pagan fertility god worship. And that was a problem for Israel its entire existence. Verse 16. For Israel is stubborn like a stubborn calf. Now the Lord will let them forage like a lamb in the open country. I don't know if you've ever done any cattle herding. If you've ever had an opportunity to spend any time with a young calf, it will do what it wants to do, and you're pretty much going to struggle to get it to do what you want to do. It will follow mom and the food, but it won't follow you, and it definitely won't do what you tell it to do. And that's the picture here. Israel was stubborn and didn't want to follow God's direction. And so God said, fine. Remember, the relationship between God and Israel was always tied to the land. And God said, fine, I'm going to remove you from the land. And you're going to be minus your relationship with me and minus the possession of your land. And like we've discussed before, the 10 tribes to the north, they never really gained their possession back. Some came back when in 536 when the southern tribes returned. Some of them had mixed with the southern tribes when they were taken captive in 605 to 586 under Nebuchadnezzar and taken into Babylon. But they had already been in captivity for 100 and some years further north. Some of those families had mixed, but others didn't. And we kind of lose contact with them. I've been trying to get a better understanding of where the tribes went, and I'm so far not successful in being able to make any kind of real determination. Other than to say there is a future when God will appoint from each tribe, and so at least God knows where they are and how to separate them, but we don't. And the return from captivity in 536, we have now, we call them Jews for the first time because they're really Judean, and most of the tribes are not represented in those people that we see in New Testament times. Verse 17, Ephraim is joined to idols, let him alone. For some, this is a confusing statement. Well, why did he single out one tribe? Ephraim is often another word or another name for the nations to the north, so that we don't get confused with Israel and Judah. It's all Israel. Israel was the name of the 10 tribes to the north then, but so that it's not confused, often the name of Ephraim, that one of the largest and most prosperous tribes in the north, became the name for the northern 10 tribes. So when you see Ephraim talked about in a larger than just the tribe sense, it's a reference to the 10 tribes to the north. Because Ephraim had a strong attraction to idols or false gods, God would leave them unprotected and allow her to go to her doom. It wasn't that God hadn't warned them. As we'll see as we continue through our minor prophet study, the minor prophets that preached to the tribes to the north, they warned them and warned them and warned them. God is going to get you, and it's going to happen soon. And those minor prophets that are preaching before Israel is taken captive, they do nothing but warn Israel, and Israel just doesn't pay attention. They're not predisposed to listening to Jehovah God, is the problem. Because their leadership, the priests that remained in the northern tribes, many of them began to lead people to the pagan gods. The kings led them to the pagan gods. And so nobody was leading them back to Jehovah except the prophets. And it was customary that if you didn't like what the prophet said, you didn't listen to what they did. And you didn't listen to what they said, and you didn't follow what they told you to do, and as a result, Israel went into captivity in 722. Verse 18. Their drink is rebellion, their commitment, they commit harlotry continually. Her rulers dearly love dishonor. That's an indictment big time. The immorality of Israel following the pagan gods after they had entered into an agreement with God when they took possession of the land, that he would be their God and they would be his people. Now they're violating that. The terms of the contract that they had said that as long as they remained faithful to him, they would get to stay there. He would bless them. They would have water coming down from Mount Hermon. They would have tremendous green grass and fruit and vegetables growing. But when they rejected him, when they began following false gods, when they began not being obedient, God said, look, I'm warning you. Then he'd send another prophet, I'm warning you. Then he sent another prophet, I'm warning you. And then finally the Assyrians conquered them. And they were taken into captivity, and they were removed from the land. The rulers of Israel, as the verse talks about, her rulers dearly loved dishonor. The rulers didn't want to obey the covenant that they had. They wanted to be the rulers. Remember what the pattern was that God wanted to establish with Israel. Prior to King Saul being the first king, the pattern was God was king. It was a true theocracy. And that God appointed temporal rulers to rule over, but he was the king. And Israel said, now the collective of all 12 tribes said, we want a king like the other nations around us. And God said, no, you don't. Yes, we do. No, you don't. And God gave them what they asked for. And so they had 40 years of King Saul. King Saul was for a while a good guy. Then he became cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs. And he began to chase David around. And for more than 10 years he chased David around, who by this time had been appointed by God, had been told to the nation, he's the next king. Well, how does that make Saul feel? So he goes crazy and chases him around. David then becomes king when Saul commits suicide in battle. And David rules, although David is an adulterer and a murderer, and he's a good guy. He loves God most of the time. He follows God most of the time. And then Solomon, who prays for wisdom, and then as a result of praying for wisdom, God gives him tremendous wealth and gives him tremendous prosperity as well as wisdom. And he's a pretty good guy until he gets more enamored with the ladies. And he has way more wives than any man ought to have, besides lots of girlfriends. And his wives, as was demonstrated by Eve and Adam, begin to lead them astray, lead him into pagan worship. And God says, fine, we're just not going to do this the right way. And when Solomon dies, there's a power struggle, and the tribes to the north secede from the union and become a separate nation, and the tribes to the south remain underneath the dynasty of David. And all the kings in the south are sons or grandsons or great-grandsons on down the line of David. And the tribes to the north are under whoever has the biggest sword. And we have a few short dynasties in the north, but they're all bad guys. And none of them lead them to follow God. None of the kings to the north. And only a few kings to the south lead them in following God. And so we come now to where Hosea is warning them. And he says in verse 18, their drink is rebellion, they commit harlotry continually. The rulers of Israel, every single one of them, was drawing people away from following God. And it just continued to be a continual spiral downward of their relationship with God. Verse 19, the wind has wrapped her up in its wings, and they shall be ashamed because of their sacrifices. The result of the sin will be shame on the entire people in the form of judgment. There were a few good people in Israel that still followed God. God promised always there would be a remnant. The analogy of the whirlwind brings to mind a sudden and rapid sweeping of Israel from the world stage. And Assyria, I said earlier that Assyria had an arrangement with Israel. Israel was paying tribute money to the king. Essentially, that is, they were bribing the king not to attack them. When you start doing that, then you're owned by that other nation. And the king in Assyria got to determine what Israel did. You know, the king in Nineveh, which was the capital of Assyria at the time, he could call up the king in Israel and say, listen, this is what you're going to do. And Israel said, yes, sir. And they did it. Well, at some point, about 724 BC, the king in Assyria said, I had enough of this. They're not just going to pay tribute. I'm going to take the whole people. And by 722, Israel was taken into captivity. All of Israel territory was occupied. Assyria came down here, and they occupied all the way down through Samaria, down into here. And at the same time that Assyria came and occupied all of Israel, they went into some of the cities of northern Judah, and they began to pick them off. And Judah began to say, oh, wait a minute. That's not the way this is supposed to go. And God then prevented further access to the area from Assyria. But all of that northern part of Israel was conquered by Assyria. All of the strong, all of the young men, all of the good-looking young ladies, they were all taken into captivity. Left in the northern area were the old people, the people that couldn't walk, the people that rode, this is insensitive, but the people that rode the short bus. That's who got left. Now, that's important for us to understand this, because as we look at future for them, history for us, particularly in this region here, Samaria, there's a reason Israel, or I should say Judeans, after they returned to the land in 536, and by Jesus' time, the people that rode the short bus remained there, as well as people that the Assyrians brought in. So you have this mixed group of people. The old, the infirmed, and the not so bright and so forth of the Jews are left. I should say the Israelites are left. And then people that the Assyrians brought in from other lands that they conquested. And so you have this hybrid group of people, and the Jews that had remained pure during the captivity, they don't want anything to do with them. Because their teaching was that you remained separate from them. And so it's easy to understand how by the time of Jesus, when Jesus would walk down from Nazareth, which is in this region here, he would come around this side of the river and walk down through the Decapolis and come in through Perea back in here. He didn't only remember he said in the gospel, I have needs to go through Samaria. And the disciples said, no, maybe not. Because it was a shorter trip going this way rather than coming around through this way. But they would rather go into Gentile territory because the Decapolis, this is all Gentile held in the time of Jesus. Decapolis is a Greek term, and talking about the 10 cities in that region. They're all Greek cities. But they would rather walk through Gentile territory, knock off the Gentile dirt here when they cross the river, and go to Jerusalem than they would go through Samaritan territory. They hated the Samaritans that bad because they were half-breeds. They were the result of the weakest and the smallest and the least smart that were left. And so the Jews really hated them. You have to understand that when you start studying the New Testament. Why couldn't they walk through that area? Because it was hard to walk? No, because they hated the people. They hated them worse than they hated Gentiles. And so that was a result of that Assyrian captivity in 722. That entire region gets conquered by Assyria, and everybody that has anything to offer Assyria is taken into captivity. Now, the same thing happened when Nebuchadnezzar came into the southern area in 605, and he began the siege on Jerusalem. Daniel was taken captive in probably that first round of captivity in 605, and that's the way they did that. They populated their ranks with smart and strong people by taking them from other nations. That was the way militaries and schools were built up, was by taking the smart people of the people they conquered. So Israel gets swept off the map like a whirlwind, as the analogy in the passage goes. Any questions on chapter 14? I'm sorry, chapter 4. Yep. No, Assyria is much older than Syria. Syria is a relatively new, modern invention. Syria was a name used for the region during the time of Paul and Jesus, but it wasn't as much a political name as it is today. But Assyria is much older. Assyria was a power before Babylon, was a power during, it was beginning to be a powerful nation even during the time, nation's kind of a wrong way to, grouping of people, grouping of tribes maybe would be a better way, even by the time of Abraham. So Assyria is one of the older people groups in the world. Yeah. Not quite. Syria doesn't go as far east as Assyria. Assyria has a lot of the northern area. I don't think I have a map that will show us enough of that. No, I don't have it up. A lot of the northern and eastern area of what today would be Iraq, even into Iran, was occupied by Assyria. No, it's certainly not today, because there is no Assyria. There's Syria. Syria backs up to Iraq and north to Turkey. Assyria was then, as Daniel prophesied, was then conquered by Babylon. And then Babylon was conquered by Persia, the Medo-Persians. And so we're talking about kind of the same area, although Babylon and Persia were further south and east. When they conquered Assyria, they took all of their territory as well. I didn't prepare a map of that area, but that's Libya, yeah. You can't use left and right anyway. because it all depends on which way you're facing. You really got to use north, south, east, and west because they don't change. Well, north is always north. I mean, I hate to state the obvious. Left is relative. North is not. What depends on the map? A lot of maps of the Holy Land will have north to the right side of the map. You can when you're talking about a page. Because here's the deal. For us, north is always at the top of the map, right? That's the way we learned it. Not all the maps are oriented that way. A lot of the maps that I have in the computer are oriented sideways for the Holy Land. Correct. Yeah. Yeah.
When you're saying east of Israel, you're going further back towards Asia.
Correct. If you go west of Israel, you get wet. See? Mediterranean. Wet. So today, okay, you can change now. Today, you go east of Israel. Here's Israel. You go east of Israel, you've got Jordan, the Hashemite kingdom of Transjordan. And then you continue to go east. What do you come to? The Wall of China is way further east. You come to Iraq, and then Iran, and all of that other stuff as you go further, Pakistan, and all the stand countries. They're actually, most of the stand countries are to the north, but directly north of Israel, here, is Lebanon and Syria. Syria borders the Golan. What the news hasn't been telling you is Israel has been defending themselves against a bunch of ISIS people coming into the Golan, because Syria is mostly occupied by ISIS now. So Damascus here, that's where Paul was headed when he came to know the Lord. Libya here, Syria here, Iraq would be over here. And then, of course, Egypt is down here to the south. Technically, Egypt is in two continents. No, because they are in, Egypt is in Africa, but it's also in Asia. Yeah. This region, a little common or current events, this region right here is called the Levant. The reason President Obama says ISIL instead of ISIS, Iraq and Syria, he says the Levant, so that ISIS can legitimately claim the whole area. You ever wonder why he and his minions are the only ones that say ISIL and everybody else says ISIS? Exactly what I just said. This area, let me put it here so you can see it. This area right here is a technical cartographic term for the region of three continents coming together. As Africa comes together with Asia, comes together with Europe, they're in Turkey. That region where the three continents come together is called the Levant. And so the president and his people have decided that ISIS has claim to that entire region. And so they call it the Islamic State in the Levant, instead of the Islamic State of Iraq and Syria. So there's a little bit of prejudice on his part when he talks about it. Yeah. But this whole region is the Levant. They, in Libya, a bunch of Coptic Christians that fled from Egypt during the uprising, the so-called Arab Spring, they fled to Libya. They have been killed by ISIS in Libya. It's not the same. It's not technically the same group as what's in Syria and in Iraq. They're not. They currently are not. The Muslim Brotherhood was thrown out of power in Egypt. That was the second coup that's happened in Egypt since the Arab Spring. But I'm not sure there's a big difference. But they threw out the Muslim Brotherhood, and they actually made it illegal to be a member of it, for whatever that means. Of course, we have a brother-in-law who is a Coptic Christian. And when the Islamic Spring, or the Muslim Spring, or the Arab Spring was happening in Cairo, his family, Coptic Christians, couldn't even get out of their house. They couldn't hardly get food because as soon as they got out of the house, people were there attacking them. So we don't have the ability to go on to chapter 5. Any other questions on the region or on Hosea 4? This is the most challenged piece of dirt in the world, because it is the joining of three continents. The people coming from the north to take Egypt always had to go through Israel. The people coming from the east to take Egypt or to go to the north always had to go through Israel. Israel is the most contested piece of dirt in the world, and it was given by God to the Jews. And it will not be until the millennial kingdom when they will occupy it. Where will they occupy during the millennial kingdom? What does Scripture tell us? How far? What did God promise to Abraham? No, not as far as the east is from the west. The Euphrates. So, Jordan and half of Iraq is in land promised to Israel promised to Abraham by God. They've never occupied the majority of their, or the totality of their territory. Under Solomon, they came to the greatest extent, but they've never occupied it all. No, well, God will be on the throne then, so it doesn't matter whether they like it or not. Father, thank you for allowing us to spend some time looking at your word and even looking at some current events and how that plays into what we see happening in the future. Thank you for what you reveal to us in your text. Thank you that you show us that you're a merciful and gracious God, that you gave Israel plenty of warning. It wasn't like they didn't know that they were doing wrong. So thank you for that. We look forward to the next service where you are honored and glorified as we spend some time with Pastor Daniel and Pastor Elise. Thank you for their ministry. Thank you for the young men that Pastor Daniel is training in Cap-Haitian, Haiti at the Bible Institute. The work that they're doing at planting the gospel in the hearts of people there. For the work that Pastor Elise is doing in his own church in Fort Lauderdale and the travel back and forth to Haiti frequently as he does. Give them journey mercies now. Give us a time to fellowship and to honor you, and we look forward to bringing you glory in Jesus' name.
Thank you for watching this sermon on demand at Friendship Community Church. If this message has been helpful to you in your understanding of the Word of God, please let folks at Friendship Community Church know by sending an email to watching@friendshipcomchurch.org. Thank you again for watching, and we look forward to seeing you in person at Friendship Community Church.